Depot. This is an ongoing series, the Wiener KI-Gespräche. It's the 4th time. And I would like to thank Klaus Speidel for planning and organizing this event series. Thank you so much, Klaus. Next time it will be at Dom Museum in December, and we will go on at Depot in the new year back here. Thank you for coming on a Friday night. And I would like to tell you that this is streamed on YouTube. So if you don't want your voice to be recorded, you can just talk in the room and not into the mic, but we would appreciate it if you did. Thank you so much. Thank you also our online viewers. There will be another cooperation with Klaus and the Angewandte. We will start in November with Oliver Ressler, the series called How to Make Art When the World is Burning. I think the topics will be the same, maybe, some of them, and the ethics, and of course the art. You find everything in our program, and I wish you great discussion. Thank you so much for being here. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Sarah, for that nice introduction, and thank you for hosting, of course, the Wiener KI-Gespräche. It started in January, so this is the 4th edition. We started with a topic around tech and art. Of course, the space here is historically linked very strongly to art, and so am I. But I've been moving more and more into, well, trying to see what art can do for things that are not art. So beyond art, technology, society, hence also this question of how to make art when the world is burning, really the question of how art can address the burning topics of our time. And I got interested in artificial intelligence really more actively when Claudia Larche, who's also in the room and who was in the first Wiener KI-Gespräche, was having a guest professorship at the University for Applied Arts, where I also teach, and said, I want to do a practical kind of art practice seminar on AI. Do you want to do the theory seminar? And I said yes, and at that time, I immediately thought, well, it's not just about like what can artists use, how can they make different pictures, or how can they use new tools to make pictures, music, but really also about conscious citizenship. So I think a good artist today, and maybe in all times, when you think of people like Goya, who did the disasters of war, denouncing the Napoleonic Wars, when you think of Georges Grosz, Käthe Kollwitz, many of the artists we cherish, if not all, were also very active citizens in their time and were trying to, reveal the problems of their time, of their society, and get them to change. And so that's really when I started to be interested in issues of AI ethics. It took now 4 editions of the Wiener KI-Gespräche, of the Vienna Conversations to AI, to really dare to finally address the topic of ethics, a bit of an elephant in the room, which is, of course, always also one of the topics, even when we talked about art. Claudia evoked a question of feminist AI. Her work is very much interested in bias as well, and how AI models reproduce biases, which for me was also the first kind of way in which I thought of an potential ethical problem in AI. And I think most people mostly think first of bias, so how AI models reproduce visions of the world that are maybe not ones we want to continue to. For instance, when you look for a CEO, the original models would always show a white male. Certain professions would always be associated to male professions, because arguably that's how the world is, and that's what's in the data. And of course, if the data is also old, and in order to have a lot of data, you often have older data, it's often even worse. So there's one case in the US where probation was supported by AI, so deciding if someone would get out of jail on probation. And after a while, they realized that black people got much less chances of getting probation approved by the AI system. because of course the justice system was for a long time racist, and this racism is now inscribed in the AI. And one of the problems is of course that then you have the feeling that it comes back with this superior rationality, because now it's AI, it's not humans deciding, and you can think now it's fine, it's objective, but of course it's not necessarily. So the first one was really starting from arts, but already tackling these questions. The second one was on music, which connects to Alexander Schindler's own history with AI as well. And I'll ask you to tell us a little bit of how you got engaged with the topic soon after. And the third one was in the collaboration with Angewandte at Angewandte Innovation Lab. It was on fake, on the question of fake. Is AI art fake art? When is it fake art? Also the question, of course, of the deep fake and these things. And yeah, the fourth one is now on ethics, and fifth one will be on work. So the one that will happen at Dom Museum, where they have an exhibition called Alles in Arbeit, that is about work, art on work. And where they have a program that accompanies it. We will be talking about work. And you see that we're only three. Sabine Kösegi, unfortunately, had to call in sick, and she literally called in sick, and I was even sorry that she had to call me, or she felt she had to call me because she sounded so bad, and she was really sorry to not be able to come tonight. And perhaps we're trying to work on having her come on in December. It's 11th of December. As some of you may know, she is on a professorship that is actually around work, so it still makes very much sense to have her. So for those who want to also hear Sabine Kösegi, who was to be the third guest today, maybe it will happen in December at Dom Museum. But now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce my two guests, Asma Derja, who, well, for me represents really a kind of personal and grassroots initiative to this question of AI and AI ethics, worked in big corporations. The name can be said? Yeah. Amazon, worked at Amazon for many years, and at one point decided to quit her job. And maybe you can tell us a little bit about your history right now and how you started to get engaged in the topic. And Alexander Schindler, who is at the AIT, Austrian Institute of Technology. And full disclosure, I just last week started a job at AIT to work on art in relationship to technology. So I will be responsible for trying to implement artful methods in the technology context, again, in this kind of quest of looking at what art can do for fields beyond art, and how art can also inform other fields. So now we'll be colleagues, as you learned tonight from me. Yes. Okay, so maybe Asma, do you want to start telling us a little bit how you got involved in the topic and about your personal history?
Is it on? Yeah. Hi everyone. Very pleased to be here tonight. I spent the last, today is the third day in Vienna. Just finished a very nice convening here called Cult Tech Summit, and being here also kind of further strengthens the vision I have for ethical AI, which I will tell you about, which is really walking the talk when it comes to interdisciplinary dialogue. So being here in this artsy space with people coming genuinely because they're interested in the topic on a Friday night, as a dear friend has said, means a lot. So my name is Asma. I am North African, immigrated to Europe, to study, and from there started working in business and strategy and consulting for the last 15 years, developing digital transformation strategies for Fortune 500, and eventually landed in AWS, Amazon Web Services, which is a big cloud infrastructure provider and also AI builder, but their say main work is really building the infrastructure for AI. And about 2 years ago, around this time of the year, towards the end of 2023, I took a leap of faith and left that job because, almost as a silent act of protest, there were very many things I saw that I wasn't really happy with, and mostly the lack of ethical checkpoints and disregard for society and solving societal issues with the technology. And probably, I think the deal breaker was seeing that the cloud infrastructure that I was, trying to sell and explain how it was progress was actually used by military and war crimes, and that was for me, that's it, I'm done. But I didn't want to completely disengage with tech, because I knew it wasn't, big tech isn't one block. It's thousands of people. In fact, we are a new breed. A lot of people are like me. I'm not that special. I just decided to leave. A lot of the people inside are still working, refuse that kind of future that these, big corporations are trying to impose on us. Anyway, I left because I had a vision, and that vision was I wanted to come back to those companies, but I wanted to build alliances outside. I needed to build coalitions, interdisciplinary, global by design, with feminist AI, decolonial AI, a lot of these, and go back with very tangible solution. And that's my journey for the last year and a half, which started, by meeting people such as yourselves, right? And having a proper nonprofit, and working on developing tools that I will tell you about. I don't want to spoil everything but yeah, very nice to meet you all and be here tonight.
Did I say that you founded the Ethical AI Alliance? Maybe I didn't mention that.
No,
term.
but we will have plenty of time to
Yes,
discuss that. So that's the nonprofit I lead. It's called
reason,
Ethical AI Alliance. I'll be happy to share a little bit more about our work, but our main goal is really holding technology builders accountable, because we understand how they work. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Alexander. And I also didn't mention your official connection to AI as the head of the AI task force at the Austrian Institute of Technology to complete the presentations. Yes.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. Yes, at the moment I'm leading the AI task force partly. AI task force is a team which establishes AI governance at EIT. We develop guidelines, also ethical guidelines. We help developers and employees at EIT to get to know what is AI ethics, why is it relevant, how should they deal with it. A lot of those people never have heard of this, never have been trained on this, and so on. This is a large task. On the other hand, I'm also still a researcher, operational researcher in fields of natural language processing. And how did I get in touch with AI? I started my PhD on music information retrievals, so analyzing digital music to get to estimate the mood, the genre, to find similar music and so on. And because digital music, the audio signal is such a complicated thing to get all the subjective things like art and emotions and personal expectations and favorite music. So we really had to dive into machine learning. We needed to pull all the kind of the triggers and try everything. So before I was actually not really dealing with machine learning and had no clue, so I had to really dive into this. And then with this deep learning kind of movement, starting with 2012, 2015, this became a huge traction. And then at EIT, I also shifted from arts, from music projects to, because I'm working in the Center for Digital Safety and Security. I was shifting more to general audio analytics in security relevant projects with police, in back then hypothetical post-terroristic attack scenarios where we identified gunshots in CCTV media recordings and so on, which really helps the investigators to speed up investigations and so on. And they started to touch kind of ethical, critical projects and situations. And then kind of progressing and having my own teams, I started to change the development process so that things become reproducible, so that our solutions provided become trustworthy. And then this AI Act development came, and for me this was an opportunity to be kind of an early adopter, to jumpstart on this, and to already be prepared to deliver trustworthy AI as kind of a quality thing, so we can provide trustworthy software. And so I started to build competences and knowledges, and Peter Biegelbauer from AIT started to develop the AI Ethic Labs. And then later on, I think a few years later, we applied for the flagship project of the artificial intelligence mission. And now we're leading this project. It's on trustworthy AI, and it is a very large initiative with 22 partners in Austria.
Thank you. Perhaps one word about AIT, because it should be as known as the MIT, but it's not yet. No. It's the largest, I think, non-university research body in Austria, with about 1,500 employees, that tries to bridge the gap between university research and kind of applications in industry.
Perfectly described.
Good. Yeah, so we were thinking, or I was thinking a lot about how to structure this meaningfully, to kind of cover as much ground as possible on these questions of AI. You already spoke about trustworthiness as being one key term, because one question is, what's ethics supposed to be, right? And how do you operationalize it? What's a concept that you can work with? And well, I thought that it might be interesting to really walk through the different stages it takes to come to the consumer, and then beyond to the effects it has on people working with AI, using AI as an end consumer as well, but perhaps in between stages as well as a professional. So to start, maybe with the hardware, if that is part of ethics. Is it, Asma, would you say the hardware is part of ethics? And can you tell us a little bit about your investigations into that component?
Yes, actually, like a big part of my job was going out there explaining that AI is first and foremost hardware. So this is one of my favorite things to explain, because it's logistics. Like,
isn't it a cloud?
Yeah.
You worked in Amazon Cloud Services, right?
Exactly. There is no AI if there is no cloud. And in fact, the idea, one of our main arguments for digital transformation and selling AI application was you guys need to modernize, you need to migrate. So usually, in simple terms, and I don't know about the audience here, if we have people who worked or not, but just as a reminder, what we do is we go ask companies, government, museums, you name it, all sort of organizations, to move their data from their own premises to what we call the cloud. Now, whoever came up with this word cloud is a brilliant marketer, because we think it's something light. We think of it as, it's just the cloud, right? It almost feels like lighter than it was, but it's huge data centers, in fact, mega ones that are being built as we speak. And that, it goes without saying that they need electricity, right? They need water, they need land. And so let's first start with that. That is a huge issue. It's the environmental impact of AI, of AI cloud. So AI, when we say AI, we definitely need to talk about the cloud, because some people omit this almost as a strategy in ethics, so that we can just tackle, one piece of the AI ethics, which is, we will talk about later, which is the outcomes, the bias. But first, it's all this hardware, and it's the minerals, because this data and GPUs, the ones that store the data need actually minerals. So it's a whole value chain of extraction. And where does it go to build these centers? It's not going to come to, Vienna's most, prettiest neighborhoods or the privileged. It will go to, it becomes now we have another lens of the marginalized communities. Now, if you go, and I invite each one of you after this discussion to go and look for yourself, you will find actually a lot of discussion going on, communities fighting to stop the construction of data center in their land. Usually it's indigenous communities, it's We know that by 2030, which is literally, around the corner, some data centers are going to, consume more water than entire nations. Again, facts. So I invite everyone to think about AI and in these terms first. And then comes the models we're building and the training. And who's doing that labor? Again, these are not in Europe, right? Some of the ones we know, at least some of these stories that emerge, are about Kenyan labor, very underpaid, confronted with a huge data set of sometimes violent or like doing this labor for very cheap data labeling with some very shady gray guidelines that have been sent from, Meta's Ireland, headquarters, sent to Philippines, Kenya, to data. So I think, and that's when you mentioned Kate Crawford, right? So I invite everyone to read Atlas of AI, a very good book when it comes to, breaking down AI into logistics. You let me know about the time, by the way. I have no idea what's the time limitation, because I'm passionate about the topic. But yeah, so this is, it comes, and obviously I'm giving you the fact, but also like some ideas of things to consider when you look at AI from this perspective.
Yeah, in this context, we thought, because we will probably talk about some references, I will put a resources section on Wiener KI-Gespräche.eu, so you can find the links to the books, to the articles, the persons, the tools, and so on, to kind of continue to go deeper after the conversation. Alexander, is there some way to avoid this problem? Can we have an alternative to the data centers in these communities? What are the solution approaches, even technically speaking? Can we use different minerals? I don't know how far you're involved in this debate, but of course you could start with the minerals. Is there different approaches that wouldn't use these rare minerals, that wouldn't destroy countries and poison the water? Yeah. Is there a way to work without these data centers? A lot of people seem to think that if they install a model on their computer, it's much better. Is it? So.
It's a very difficult and political question. So, on the first point, I fully agree with all you have said. On the second point, I also want to defend a little bit AI. So not everything in the cloud is AI. The field of computer science is huge, and everything consumes space on a data center. So the entire information technology industry is growing and growing, but yes, AI has a huge impact on this. And why is it specifically in AI growing? Because it's much easier if you let it grow. So it has been shown that, or it is common knowledge that bigger models provide better quality in results. But it's also possible to have smaller models with the same amount with the same quality, but it just requires much more work to develop them, to fine-tune them, to test them. You can just kind of skip all this testing, fine-tuning, and optimizing part, which also costs kind of human resources, by using a large language a larger model. And kind of this goes kind of ping pong. So larger models require more computational resources, but every kind of 6 months, you get better computational resources for the same price. So you get more compute, and it doesn't stop. You use bigger models, better quality, you buy newer hardware and so on, and the cycle never ends. And just by scaling up the hardware requirements, you can solve a lot of problems where you usually need a lot of developers to increase the quality. The second question was if it's cheaper if you run it on your local,
more resource
efficient.
Yeah.
This is, it depends on how often you use it, but usually not. So the product providers from these companies, they're also dealing with the same issues. They have to buy these computational resources. They have to spend a lot of money for power and cooling and so on. So they want to make these data centers as efficient as possible. So they parallelize everything, and from this perspective, it might be the best, most efficient solution for scaling these products. The other thing is that they also advertise it very efficiently, so these products get used more and more and also require more resources. But scaling this to all the computers that we have, I think would be more inefficient from an energy perspective, yes.
And of course, I mean, there's this idea of the scaling laws, or what Ilya Sutskever in OpenAI was really pushing. He used to be the head of science or the chief scientist of OpenAI. And he had this experience with scaling as being the most efficient thing. So more data, more compute and so on. And you throw more compute and more data at the model, and basically it gets better, right? There is, so you said if you used less compute, you would need more engineering to still make it work. Is that, yeah, the question is, what I wanted to ask, and I kind of lost myself there, is do we have to scale? Why do we have to scale more? That it's a bit a question with growth, right? We ask this question, and a lot of people are asking the question, do we need growth? And we could ask, do we need scaling? Or what do we gain from scaling? Or would there be an approach where we say, okay, we don't scale, we try a different approach? What's the argument? What's the reason for having to scale?
It's exactly what I wanted to like challenge. First of all, I mean, call me radical or whatever. Do we need all this technology? The question is that if the technology is gonna not make us better or our society better, do we need it? And this obsession with optimization scale does not belong to everyone. It's just been imposed on us. There's a lot of, power asymmetries, as if it needs an intersectional view to understand. Some of take Peter Thiel of Palantir and his vision of the word, take, there's a bunch of Silicon Valley. Probably the majority doesn't share that vision of the word. Like, everyone I've met in my life never shared that vision, so this idea of them wanting to pursue a general intelligence that's more powerful than any human. Why? Why not dedicate its resources to cure cancer, to improve, end poverty, predict the climate, help find solutions? There's so many. I'm not saying technology is bad. I'm saying it's not going where it should be going, and just follow the money to see that. Like, use case number one for AI is warfare. Yep, it's predictive targeting, with drones. We've seen in the case of Palestine. We know it. I've seen AWS, Microsoft. It's all on the news. I'm not saying anything NDA, and it's a laboratory. What happened there is going to happen in Ukraine, in other regions of the world. And again, like, where are the use cases? Where is the investment? Where is the money? And what's with this obsession of scaling? Small models can be extremely powerful because they can target one. First of all, they can be very community-led. Actually, this topic is not that explored. One thing I would love to pursue in the future was actually a PhD in this direction. But I struggled even to find an institute that was interested in the topic. Exploring small language model. What if AGI is not this big LLM, but it was mostly a small targeted models to fix issues?
I mean, there's also, of course, it's hard to come by the real data on energy consumption, but there's this research body that also has models, Hugging Face, notably a researcher called Sara Lucioni, who publishes, they try to establish something like the star system for washing machines, where you have energy efficiency for models. And what's interesting when you look at their list is that the difference between the model that consumes the least and the one that consumes the most is 65,000-fold. So the smallest model they tested, the least consuming model, consumes 65,000 times less than the biggest one. And LLMs are notorious for being big consumers, And so using an LLM to sort movie titles is actually throwing a lot of resources at a problem that you could solve with something much smaller. So maybe one, I mean, if we also want to give some takeaways for an ordinary citizen, is to maybe go beyond the LLM. So when you look for a certain purpose, right? Would that be something you agree with, Alexander?
Yes, of course, because it's also an approach that we are taking in my research group.
Yeah, tell us about it.
We have now a long research line on disinformation and toxic content like hate speech detection. It's not for filtering or detecting, but it's more like gaining insights. What is being discussed in social media or in online media? What are the main arguments? How is the discussion led? Is it engaging? Is it toxic? And so on. And what can you learn from this? It's always in collaboration with social scientists, with non-profit organizations, and also it's every time, every project is supported through work packages for ethical and legal topics. And it's very interesting. But it's also very challenging because if you have the large amount of information, you need to process it efficiently. And of course, you can throw everything to a large language model and you get perfect results. But on the one hand, it costs a lot of energy. On the other hand, it takes years to process all this information. So what we're looking is using large language models to pre-process a data set where you can train on a small, efficient model. And that's possible. We've shown this. And this is very efficient. It is fast, efficient, and it's dedicated for the specific task. And there you have all the control you need. You can look at all the biases. You can look at model robustness. You can make it. You have full control. Yeah. But very often it is easier or less effort if you just outsource all this decision and that to large language model. And this is what we see very often. That the center processing unit in an application or in a software is a vanilla open source foundation model, not fine-tuned, not optimized with all the biases that you don't know which is in there and so on. And yes, it's possible to have small models that are very highly efficient.
So what do you say when you see that? It means that people who now say, okay, we have implemented AI in our products, most of them just have an API access to one of the large model providers. Is that
exactly
what you mean?
using a cloud API? Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. That's certainly important to observe. And maybe moving to the next step. Which is, okay, now we have the infrastructure, we talked about the infrastructure, the compute necessary, water consumption, CO2 emission, but now the data is the next step, is it? I would say, yes, the next step is the data. What are issues we should be conscious of in terms of the data? What are the problems there? Of course, copyright is something that we are very concerned about in the art world, music world, journalism. There are big lawsuits going on, the New York Times against OpenAI and so on and so forth. How about other data-related problems that should be on the map of ethical AI?
Well, there's definitely the data bias. I mean, like you mentioned in the beginning, I think it's one of the most sort of known risks of AI. Usually it's a topic that it's pretty, I wouldn't say well covered, but at least there's some awareness about it in terms of
give us a few examples.
Gender bias, race. There's the AI Justice League, Dr. Joy Bluamini. She's great. She's actually done a really cool Netflix on that, showing her whole journey when she was testing facial recognition. She's as a black woman in the U.S. She's a researcher, and she's found out, that she's one of the, started talking about this topic. There's also Timnit Gebru, who's also
so namely that facial recognition doesn't work very well with black people,
yes.
Which often leads the police in the U.S.
Exactly.
Of taking someone in because they show up on facial recognition as having committed a crime. that they didn't actually commit.
Exactly, and even further, not just that, but really see there is a bias in society. So imagine that bias being amplified, you know, on a scale of, I don't know, I don't have a number, but like hugely amplified. That's the risk we're taking. So more discrimination, you know, for racial community, marginalized community. Again, it will, you know, touch marginalized communities and minorities much more than privileged, you know, people from the, I would say, you know, the white men in the U.S. or, you know, so it's important to listen to the voices that are, you know, leading these kind of conversations. They're not many, but, and then the topic I actually really kind of spent some time also investigating and building also connection around this. I've been talking to people in unions in Kenya and really diving into the data labeling, as I said in the beginning, which is really one of, without data labeling, we cannot train the model, and therefore we cannot have AI. So data labeling, the conditions of that, the guidelines, and there actually, there starts the bias also on how to, you know, label. I think I've done, I'm an Arabic speaker, among other languages, but I've done a little bit of research on the word that we say 1 million times a day, which, for example, God is great, Allah Akbar, and that actually can be labeled because of the whole, you know, September 11th and all the stuff that happened after, and dehumanization of Muslim men and all, you know, the political, again, everything is political, so it's kind of, you know, you take that and put it in data models, and then Allah Akbar can be seen as labeled as violent, when in fact it's something that, you know, my grandma would say 100 times a day. It's nothing. So who does these guidelines, and who approves them? And see, I think it's really important to know, like, and I was in a conference and this lady said this really, so this, she works in sort of standardization, and she's like, even a chair has to go through so many standards and certification of quality before can I go in, because otherwise if I sit, I'll fall, and then who's liable? But AI not. One of the most powerful tools we have, has to go through no certification whatsoever. I've seen it. That's the only sort of really 100% insight I can give you, because I've seen it. And at no point somebody said, oh, but what if? And so when something happens, there's a harm, say a kid, you know, committed self-harm after chatting with a chat box. I'm sure you've seen some of these examples. And then they say, oh, sorry, it's an error. But when we go and there are leaks actually of their guidelines, and we know that it was by design, and that's the issue. It's not just an isolated incident. And I'll tell you later about the work we have been doing with my community, is proving that this isn't an isolated incident, that these harms are systemic, and they are within, you know, the product by design, and that's really important. And back to the, you know, your value chain. I know you wanted to speak about the data, but there is a lot of, you know, the way this has been labeled, the way this has been treated initially can only yield to something that is going to maintain those harms.
I have one question. Is there an unbiased data set? Because, of course, you could say, okay, now let's adjust it and not... Yeah. No, I mean, for all of us, yeah, but yeah. Is there an unbiased data set? Because, yeah, it's these choices, right? It's choices of context, of... Yeah.
That's, yes, exactly. There are two aspects of why there's no bias-free data set, and I guess there will never be a bias-free data set. The one is, if we stay in the text context with large language model, it's the data those models are trained on. Those are usually trained on text content which have been created by humans. And so the content is already subjective. And the models train on content created by humans. Humans have biases, have opinions, and so on. And the other thing, the other part is, yeah, how you choose which of these texts, of these articles and so on, is used for training. And this has also been chosen by a person. And even if you write an algorithm from choosing it randomly, still there is a bias included. But AI is not only text, large language models, there's also machine data for industry applications and so on. And even there's an operator bias for choosing the time frames and so on. So in all data sets, in all machine learning models, there's a bias, yes.
I can add maybe something, and true. And there's also, like, actually, when you get to know, there's a whole ecosystem of people now working like us to sort of help fix, because eventually people are really concerned about the future, you know, of this, the road technology is taken, and getting really proactive. So there are people, there are companies and organizations that do bias correction. Just as there are people, there's a whole like audits. I know a lot of AI auditors. There's a couple of organizations such as Babel, I think, and so they do audit of the data, and then it'll give you a little bit, you know, where you failed, and then you can go back. And so there are people. The thing is, it's still niche, right? This should be by design and should be the metas and, you know, of the world, like sit in and bring in them. I'm not saying it's all doomy gloomy. There are people working on that. We just need to know them, and it's good, I think, that we know that they exist and they're doing actually really efforts. So,
I mean, one issue seems to be that you need a scale, and you probably don't have enough unbiased data, or less biased, or underrepresented communities by nature have less texts online, right? Therefore, the internet is largely dominated by what now some people call the minority world, Western countries. White content production is largely white. So if you need a lot of data, what are you going to do, right? Is that true, or can you really fix the data, or is it this model which now seems to happen mostly, is I have biased data and then I make sure that the output is not quite as biased. Maybe some of you saw this kind of where people are making fun of Google because when you asked for an image of a soldier of the Third Reich, they would show black people wearing Nazi uniforms. Right, that was their attempt to correct the bias in the data, but it overshot, of course, and then produced things that were historically incorrect and absurd, given the kind of theory or ideology behind it. So that seems to be the way it's mostly fixed right now. You try to add a layer. So the model still has CEOs is a white man, but then you tell the model, if someone says, make an image of a CEO, then you add to your prompt, and by the way, it's possible, sometimes these system prompts are leaked, so we think the model will produce what we prompted, but the reality is the model then has another prompt that runs behind your prompt, and so when you say, show me an image of a CEO, the model will say, make sure that it's diverse, like that you don't only show la la la. And so that's how they fix it. But the data has still the same bias, and so is that the majority solution? Is it the only solution right now?
I've seen models created, for example, there's a model created by a Maori community in Hawaii. They've created their own. Actually, it's a pretty good example of a small model using their data and preserving their language and giving really some good output as per the quality and standards. And I wonder if we could learn more from these community-built models. If we, did you raise your hand?
Yeah, finish.
Yeah, but yeah, I guess we'll get back to this. It's the power. The market power that big tech, 4 or 5 big players hold, is too big. And therefore, every issue that you're going to have, it's going to be tackled as their issue to ethics is a little add-on. Whether it's just PR layer, we know that, PR is something they do very good, or a little add-on to fix, like the funny example you just gave now. It's not a systemic, it's not a challenge by design, it's not this question being raised. when you build the model, because there are enough competence and there are solutions. And okay, society is biased, but right now maybe we can incorporate, maybe AI can help fix some of that bias and set the tone. Maybe you can bring, you know, actual communities when they design AI, actual, you know, bring in civil society for marginalized communities, get people to contribute, co-design and co-create, so that we have less chances of getting something biased, as opposed to doing your thing, then there's a mistake, or then eventually an error, then PR is there to say, okay, sorry, it was a mistake, bring in a little something, bandage, and then it's all little bandages, but by design, it was never meant to be unbiased, you know what I mean?
You had a remark, I suppose, or question?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no worries.
I'm sorry for interrupting. I just got excited to learn about the Maori system that they have been developing. So I was, if you don't mind. Okay. My question would be is to know whether you know how the system was funded, because I know that in many indigenous peoples or communities, it's the state that supports and supports their fundamental rights. So, and the states are on the other side, especially with regard to AI factories. They're relying pretty much on companies. So, do you know maybe how these systems are being funded?
I honestly, for the Maori specific case, I haven't really looked at the funding. I believe, yeah, some sort of not your regular channel. I don't think it's state-backed or, you know, or anything like that. But you're right. I think, at least in the case of US, it's became a playbook. It's clear when at the inauguration of Trump, you know, the first line you have all heads of the 4 big tech. What more do we need as a message? You know, it's clear, and it's not any conspiracy that part of the vision for the nation is linked to the vision they have for AI. And so it becomes very tricky, you know, it becomes political by default, like you can't escape it. They made it political. So therefore, you're right, it is these big investments are going into the other direction, but people are aware and people are fighting. So I want to tell you that there are a lot and more of people who are aware and who refuse the road we're taking, the direction we're taking with the technology. And I think proof of that, just us here, you know, connecting, but imagine this at a really bigger scale.
And also what goes in line here is that we are more and more relying or trusting general purpose AI solutions like ChatGPT. We rather go to ChatGPT and ask something instead of Googling. So we're trusting a technology that's not so well developed as a Google, where we still have this human intervention. And this already has become a vector of attack, for example, for disinformation. There are known attacks from certain groups which have generated a bot network, a network of bots, which themselves have generated fake websites, which have been generated in a way that they are attractive for other bots which collected data for training large language models. So these are decisive information-generating bots which create propaganda websites. They have generated about 70,000 websites, which should attract these bots from large major institutions for training, so that this information gets into ChatGPT or any other general purpose AI web service.
I mean, this already leads to the question of use, and I think I have a feeling we need three sessions on ethics, because we're still at the moment of the training of the models and the data. But definitely there's the so-called Pravda network, so linked to notably Russian disinformation, that some people speak of chatbot grooming. So basically, you're trying to not make websites that people will read, but websites that will be ingested by LLMs to then inform what they tell people. So it's websites, these 70,000 websites are not made to be indexed by Google. They're made to be found by the bot and crawled. And there's research where they, for instance, checked 100 items of Russian disinformation and checked with the big language models and found, I don't know what proportion, but 40% maybe at the time, reproduced it. And when I tested it was after the article came out, I tested it with 3, Claude, OpenAI's ChatGPT, and Le Chat, so as the French call the European model, the French model by Mistral. And unfortunately, at the time, Mistral was the one that was most affected, and that wasn't telling me immediately, there is no bioweapons in Ukraine, this is Russian disinformation, where ChatGPT already had the info. So they had, and then when you looked at the links it were these obscure websites, unfortunately. So
an important point to say here, because you're telling this, Mistral is a very young organization, and they're currently building their stack. An AI like ChatGPT, this is not a central AI. This is not like you state your question and then it's pushed to a large language model and you get the answer back. No, this is an entire software framework. And to mitigating like wrong or biased answers, on the one hand, yeah, they try to de-bias the large language model, but on the other hand, they put maybe not a large language models to cross-check the answers. So it's a huge software framework. ChatGPT is a huge framework which has tools which can now query the internet, pull in information that is not trained into the large language model and so on. So it's a huge software suite, and they also have cross-checks. So if you ask something like, how can I build a bomb? There's a cross-check, and this is guaranteed a software cross-check before. Maybe that the large language model would give an answer, but there's a guideline or something like this. And Mistral is also kind of building this, and I think they will develop further cross-checks and so on. So this is a stack to still develop.
So yeah, for those who are using ChatGPT, I mean, try to use maybe Mistral. At least it's European. Mm-hmm. It doesn't fall under this American law. Unfortunately, Microsoft now has also a stake, a rather big stake in Mistral, but it's hosted here and it should abide by European laws. So Le Chat or Le Chat is a better alternative usually than the American models. Well, I'd say we move to the outputs because we're already 1 hour in and maybe we go for a little bit more. So we didn't speak about copyright violations in the data and so on, but it's relatively easy to see and to research. I have something that has puzzled me, and I'll tell you about it and ask for your thoughts. I think the most radical thing I heard in terms of criticism of chatbots was an ethical argument, and it's by Josef Weizenbaum, the creator of Eliza, so the first chatbot. Eliza, probably a lot of you are aware of it, but Eliza was basically this model. I think it was 64. It was relatively simple. It had a lexicon attached to it. And the use case he most prominently developed was to make it a psychotherapist. And people would say, I have problems with my mother, and then the chatbot would check the lexicon and see that mother is part of family and maybe might ask, tell me more about your family. Or it would say, the person would say, I'm angry at my boyfriend. Oh, I'm sorry that you feel angry. Like very simple stuff. And what happened at the time is that people already started projecting on this chatbot that it was a human being. So basically, at one point, his secretary tested the chatbot and talked about problems with her boyfriend and then asked him to leave the room because she was getting so engaged with talking to this chatbot. And since then, the kind of cognitive bias to think that a computer is a human being is called the Eliza effect. And Weizenbaum was very shocked by his success, was extremely surprised by how his simplistic chatbot could create something that he called delusional thinking in human beings. And the rest of his life he spent criticizing AI, criticizing chatbots in particular. And in an interview shortly before he died in Berlin, he said, mein Grundeinwand, and I know that you also understand German, and most of you probably do, mein Grundeinwand für diese Chatbots ist im Grunde folgender: Wenn da jemand etwas eintippt und der Chatbot sagt, ich verstehe, dann ist das eigentlich eine Lüge, denn es ist ja niemand da, der versteht. Okay, so if you think that this is a sound argument, a sound ethical argument, it's unethical to have chatbots as we have them right now, that constantly say, ich verstehe, I can understand it, you feel sad, is that the truth of the matter? I mean, this is more a philosophical question, so maybe I'm a bit, but yeah, what's your feeling also, or your thoughts on this?
I love we need more philosophers, by the way, in this whole global governance of AI. We need everyone. We need artists. Because these kind of conversations don't even make it to the rooms where these decisions are made. I feel personally a general lack of trust with technology and generative AI, and I know it's a shared. I know there were some reports, and they all share the same outputs that people are not fully trusting, yet they're using. And what I've decided to focus on, really, because I'm a very practical person, I wanted to build some sort of trail of accountability to sort of take this philosophical into accountability and harm and something very tangible which we can come back and hold tech accountable. My entire life mission has become holding the tech builders accountable, but with, using their language, their methodologies, because I understand them. And so what I can tell you about, building on what you said, is what I've seen as harms that occurred, that were reported by sources, audited, vetted, that are kind of coming from these chatbots and from this trust. So this is what basically the consequences of this and what we have been able to see, whether it's, sensual language used with minors, as we said, the case of self-harm, this whole companion endomorphism, making you feel that you're talking to someone, the usage of a language that is very personal to make you fall into that trap, all is made to get you addicted to the technology. It's clear because addiction equals revenue. The only thing that is being discussed in the boardrooms is not you having a friend. No, this is go-to-market. In 6 months, it's predicted to do. We have a market of. This is how they in business 400 million market. Okay, out of this, the share of 14 to 18 is this. We know that they use 3 to 4 hours per day. Therefore, we can help them. We build something that will make them use the technology for whatever does that, so they can get more consuming our product, and therefore we're generating revenue because we're going to incorporate some ad into it, whatever, So this is what's happening. So behind this whole philosophical question that we're trying to address, there is, at the end of the day, a question of market and revenue that some people are just trying to cut through this whole thing and do it because we've allowed them as a society. We haven't put in their guardrails. We're allowing them to do this, and as long as we're allowing them, this is going to happen. So I know I didn't answer because obviously my point is really how to tackle that from the consequence point of view.
Your thoughts on this? Chatbot is one way to generate outputs. We see it now with the Google search, right? Because the Google search is based on an LLM as well, but the software suite, as you said, would be a different one, and it generates something that sounds like a Google search result or an explanation. So yeah, what's your thoughts on this quote?
First, again, I want to defend AI. AI is a technology which has a huge potential in many use cases, in many industrial domains, and so on. What I don't want to defend are companies and development decisions. So the example you gave, that the AI is responding in a way that is emphasizing, and that's a great question, and maybe, even that you ask this question shows that you have strategic thinking and so on, and kind of, it gives trust. But this was a deliberate decision made by a product designer. There is no reason to train in a model an answer format like this. Usually you state a question, you get an answer, but kind of this interaction, introduction, kind of this ramping up before you give the answer. This is personalization, and this is a product decision. And this is nothing you need to do. First, it costs energy, kind of producing every word in an answer. There was this one study from OpenAI themselves, with that people are being polite with chatbots, which is a piece of technology. It has no feelings, but it's a way of interacting with them, and this costs really a lot of energy. So, anything here is a decision made by people, and it can be made otherwise.
It's interesting because, of course, I mean, the question is now, imagine a company offers a chatbot that's not like that. That is like, here's the answer to your question. Which chatbot would you go back to? The one who's a cheerleader and constantly tells you, oh, that's so great, and it's so great that you're thinking of that, and so on. And I think the answer is you would go back to the one who's the cheerleader. And there's actually research on it. The technical term is sycophancy in chatbots, so it's basically flattery. And when they check which answers are preferred by users from chatbots, the most important is matching users' beliefs. And then there is authoritative. Sounds like it knows what it's talking about. And then way down is truthful. Truthfulness, logical soundness, way down. People want something to match their beliefs. And of course, we could have thought we were in these echo chambers of social networks, and people were talking about the bubble, and that people only hear about their point of view. You could have thought that AI can correct this. But then it's not as successful as a product. Therefore, it's even worse, because now we have all our personal echo chamber for any weird thought we come up with. And it's not even maybe good for, solving problems, because if you have a very bad problem-solving approach, the chatbot's default will be to say, great, let's run with it, instead of saying, maybe there's a better approach than the one you typed in. So it's not just that it flatters you, but it also makes them less efficient at helping you, I would say.
It can be even life-threatening, because if you're there and having, some sort of medical issue, and then you're asking and then giving you wrong, and I think the last thing I've read a couple of days ago, 45% of the output contains hallucination, which are errors. So be really careful with the output. It's not just, it didn't help me figure out the issue. It can literally endanger your life, or at some point. So I'm sure we didn't even look into this. That's one idea of a study we can do. Has Gen AI given some life-threatening? I don't know how this would be. Advice.
I mean, yes, there are these articles about, as you said, self-harm, suicide. I mean, where you can look at the conversation where the chatbot leads a person down.
Yeah, this is a different. Exactly. But this one, yes, this is a.
If it has to please you by default, if you say, well, I feel so bad about my life, I think maybe I should take my life. Well, to be sycophantic, that's a great idea, If not, it doesn't follow this rule of confirming you, and then you can build in guardrails and say, okay, even though that's the default, in this case, don't confirm it. But it doesn't always work. Some things get through. Maybe the formulation is a bit different, and it does still happen, right?
Yes, for the guardrails. No, for that. Please don't make the mistake and believe that large language models think. They don't think.
Did I say think?
It's more like it.
I hope not. I try to educate myself to not use anthropomorphizing terms, but it's so difficult.
No, try. I'm just giving this advice, and it's math, it's statistics, and it's. ChatGPT generates one word after the other based on the words already generated. So if you have 5 words, this creates the probability for the 6th word, and so on, and so on, and so on. And if you're chatting with a chatbot, you're already in a probability space where there's only kind of a given set of answers that are kind of words and sentences that can be generated. So if you're going into a direction where it's in this probability era of talking about suicide, it will generate text, maybe recommending or about suicide. So it's just all probability and statistics and so on. It does not kind of reflect, oh, I'm going into a dangerous situation, maybe I should recommend this person something else. No, it's just like the most probable word here is maybe the next 3 words is maybe you should commit suicide or something like this. Just because the most statistical, most relevant words to produce in this situation.
But there is this layer of confirmation, like prefer an answer that confirms the beliefs. Or is that also because of statistics? Is that software suite, as you called it?
That's guardrailing, yeah. Then if something that checks, oh, you're going into very, very critical discussions. Also, like ask ChatGPT something about how is it implemented. It will just immediately speed out your working against the AGBs and so on, and this is a first strike warning. And this is a guardrail implemented, and you can do this for all situations, and they're doing this for a lot of things.
There was one remark question on your part, yeah.
I would like to add this kind of ELISA effect is, thank you. I would like to add this ELISA effect seems to be more like truly human nature, that people like to talk to the pets, to their plants, have always been doing this, and we all like to do this, and I would even argue that it's a human need, and around every human need an industry used to develop, and we're kind of now in the moment of the sugar industry coming up before we start to regulate it, before we regulate it, before we understand what harm it can take. But I would argue that now that we have these possibilities, same as we had the possibilities of making very addictive food products, we will just explore how also to regulate them in an ethical and responsible way.
I mean, it didn't work so well with sugar, did it?
We're still into this battle, right? But it's changing, right? It's more, it's an ongoing battle.
People are conscious, yeah. Or do you want to respond to this before we take the other remark?
Yes, I think that's a very good point. It's not AI. I think we're talking always about this abstract concept of AI. What you're referring to, it's a software product by a profit-driven company, and they want to make profit. So they want to make it addictive or something like this. So they want to make use, they want to increase in size of users and so on.
So yes, I'm really glad you brought this up, because this is one of the major counter narrative to ethics or regulation, which are not necessarily the same. Unfair, right? In what you said, there's some fair aspect. But again, if you look at the power, the market power that's been now held by 4 or 5 big players, it's abnormal. If this was actually, in your case, the case you said, if it was kind of distributed equally, and if it was, it's really different. It's not a direct analogy, because like Alexander just said, it's a couple of companies that won't make money of you. That's the story. End of story. And then, yes, obviously they're smart enough and they're trying to look at the market needs and understand. But do you really think we need a chatbot called friend.com? I was in New York last month. Literally everywhere was friend.com. I was like, what the hell is this again? And I went, I Googled, looked into it, and it was supposed to replace your friend. I don't know. I think if we did like a referendum, I think a lot of people don't necessarily want that, but if it's there, somehow they start using it, and somehow they get addicted. So that's the question, like, is it the food and even then, I'm not pretty happy about the state of the world today, honestly. Like, if I had to go back and fix a few things by design, I would do them. So we have a chance right now, it's still early on, to maybe influence decision to make a technology that helps us. So we might as well use it before it's too late. Maybe it is already, but yeah.
Thank you. There was another.
Thank you. Yeah, I would have a question. I think we talked about biases, right? And we as a humanity are biased. Our data is biased, and that's feeding into the models. But could you maybe elaborate also? We discussed a lot about the problems which the AI models bring. I'm lacking a little bit of the advantages, right? Maybe we talk about 20%, 10% of problem it creates, but we are still in a learning process. So LLMs are, I would say, a pretty young technology still. So even when you think about the steam machines at the beginning, for sure there have been a lot of dead people because they didn't know how to use it. So I think we are not yet there. So I would be interested if you consider maybe 80-20, 90-10, what are the advantages AI brings in terms of ethics, right? Because we talked about marginalized societies, we talked about third world countries, and AI brings also a lot of advantages at their hand. There are people in Africa can use technology right now to, I don't know, create business models. They have much more resources in terms of kind of knowledge at their hand right now, which can maybe profit for their daily life. So it would be interesting, what's your view on that?
Yeah, that's a good point. So ethical advantages.
I have a slightly different view. First of all, coming from Africa myself, and have been trying to connect also with the African ecosystem. I'm not sure about. So far, Africa is fighting, first of all, to get. Some countries in Africa and some places in Africa, there's not even internet access. Like, you have to change completely your lens and start, from a total different perspective. So if you're not, internet literacy, power, compute power, you don't have compute power, you don't have your own models. And so the knowledge that you're talking about, what is it exactly? Like Western sort of, replicate of what's happening. So they have their own ecosystem. I know that Nairobi is actually, but it's kind of distracting me. I think he wants to answer, and then we can take it.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I just want to make maybe one addendum to that, because I have a friend who's creating a lot of jobs in Africa, and he is kind of hiring people. He educates them in programming, and he gives them a job. Of course, that's one very small example, but I think there are a lot of examples like this. Of course, maybe not generalized, but grassroots movements, grassroots initiatives. Not everywhere is internet, but I've been to Ghana, I had internet everywhere, and this was like 10 years ago. So I see your point, but I don't fully agree.
Yeah, fair. I mean, I don't think Africa needs to be saved. This is one of the main things I've been trying also to explain to people around the world. They have their own, again, like in Nairobi, and there's an amazing ecosystem. And it's not because they, replicated or got knowledge. They have their own generational wisdom. I wish to see models built in Africa. In fact, one of my favorite topics is Afrofuturism. And Afrofuturism is, and this is one topic I really wanted, eventually when we get closer to the end, because I've talked a lot about harms, because I've dived into this. But one of my favorite topics is the hope and optimism of a technology that serves, again, people. And I think Africa is going to be the birthplace of that, really, because they have so many urgent issues to solve. Going back to what you said, a piece of it, give me some good examples of AI. I see it coming really from Africa. I saw use cases developed to fix an issue. Even ethics, the topic of ethics is actually coming from a pretty privileged point of view. Here we are talking about ethics and how regulation. We can't go and tell people there, you need to do ethics. In fact, ethics is embedded in the way they think and they actually approach the design of their product. We don't even have to fix it because they're not necessarily driven only by money. It's community-based. I've seen some examples that are community-based to solve an actual issue of predicting rainfall, for example, because there's drought, and therefore You don't have to do an add-on called ethics and here and fight in here, because ethics is already solving an issue. And for me, that's great. Go for it. You know, you're doing. I wish to see more example than that, as opposed to, technology coming from Silicon Valley imposed on majority of people, getting people addicted, and not necessarily solving any social issue. Did it solve loneliness, which is an epidemic? No, it didn't. It actually making reports are saying it's making people feel lonelier. So just wanted to push back on the narrative that Africa needs to be saved. I think this is so 1999, where today there are beautiful examples that we can learn from Africa here. And second thing, yes, there are great examples of AI when you talk about small models, when you talk about community-led, when you talk actually about you go to Latin America, there's also a couple of really good examples, and also here in Europe. I think we need to know more of these examples. You're right. I agree with you in that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm a social scientist and work in ethics of AI in medicine, so it's a specific field, and I also want to respond to that and to the Africa discussion a little bit. But going back to, because I also work on trustworthy AI, or let's say the trustification of AI, because we don't make it a trust thing. I think we also need to reflect when we talk about Africa also, when we talk about trustworthy AI, and there's thousands of principles and recommendations and guidelines that are now circulating around the world, where they are actually made. And this is not in Africa. It's like the global north, most of them coming from US context, defining what ethics is. And this is not necessarily representing that kind of the entire world, so to say. So these kind of principles are built they are situated in some corners of the world, and also for the models we had this bias, and of course the race bias and so on. I mean, are African data involved in building these models or in the training? The training is built on, and when we think of a long time, then how can we avoid to be racist in making it African data? So I think there's much more complex questions, but I think we also need to reflect on where we situate our perspectives. So, I mean, we're sitting here in Vienna talking about Africa, and and who's making the idea or defines what ethics is in that.
And to be honest, and just adding on that, if you take stats and numbers and everything, right now, Africa is mostly known in the AI supply chain is really the cheap labor that is providing, training the models, in the entire. Yes, there is an ecosystem. Yes, we want to see more. It's still niche. In the global AI supply chain and value chain of billions, Africa right now is doing mostly the data labeling and unfortunately.
Reinforcement learning, don't produce terrorist outputs, don't produce child pornography.
Exactly.
And people need to look at the images, of course, to tell the model not to output them, or to put it in the software suite, in any case, not to output them. And thanks for that. That's a kind of very relevant precision. So not an anti-AI, but a rather anti-certain applications or certain implementations and certain principles added on top of a model and so on. Yeah.
I would like to give another perspective, not on the ethical implications, but more on the innovation part. So the entry barrier to develop something innovative, this has the kind of, it's very, very minimal at the moment. Years ago, it was really expensive. You needed expensive hardware, you needed a server, and so on. Small enterprises had to decide to invest in hardware and personnel and so on. At the moment, it's really accessible, and also the learning curve is flattening more and more. You have all these tutorials on YouTube. So for anyone outside of AI, it's now very easy to get into this topic through learning from web pages, from YouTube, and you can just sign on to a cloud service and you get compute. So you can be innovative, you can develop your service, and you can also earn something from it. So I can imagine that some small communities and SMEs in Africa draw opportunities from this new development in AI.
But do you then become an AI developer, or do you just become a consumer of an existing AI infrastructure?
If you can make a living out of it, but this is more your field. It's a good question, yes, I agree.
Well, that's exactly, that's the question, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where in the supply chain?
Repeat that question again? Sorry.
No, I said, do you then become an AI developer, or do you become a consumer of an AI product who has one application that they're making money off?
And who owns your data? And who?
We have one more question.
Thank you. I think this discussion is super interesting. So thank you all for engaging, for giving this kind of impulse on those topics, and everyone participating. One thing I just wanted to kind of add into the dialogue is kind of the topic that we do see worldwide, some kind of political shift, like in general. I mean, which is not very fortunate in terms of my perspective, but I think many, probably also in this room, feel the same. And I think what kind of reflects this is the position of big tech and in general big companies shifting with this political shift that is unfortunately driven by society as well. I mean, we do have people voting for some parties which others don't fancy, so we have this in general political shift, and then also companies and especially big companies, let it be tech but also not tech, kind of adjusting to this, which is extremely unfortunate. I'm gonna say this from my perspective as well. But what I think is kind of also on the sad side of this, that I mean, big tech was kind of a couple of years ago was on the forefront of diverse, inclusive, modern work-life balance kind of things. Like we were talking about some of those big players that kind of introduced work-life patterns that were state-of-the-art back then, and some of them still do. I mean, we do have some companies, not of those four ones, but I mean, Elon Musk and all of his companies, let's say that, let's frame it like this, but some, like, I mean, Elon Musk is on one of those criticized paths for sure, but we do have some examples also in the big tech world that are still kind of not publicly the biggest, like the most prominent ones, but how I perceive it still on the work-life balance, and also taking those points of impulses on ethics and into their daily work life. And I think this is also just one thought, which is kind of which I'm thinking about a lot, because I'm in at the same kind of position that you are, kind of like, I mean, I work for one of those companies, and I do see those topics globally and product-wise, but I also think that seeing my colleagues and seeing the work culture we have, that there's still the spirit that something needs to change, and something hopefully will eventually change. So just putting this into this kind of discussion, that, I mean, in the end, there's also people working on it, and liking working on it.
Sorry, what's the question?
Like, what do you think about this? Like, I mean, people addressing this.
First of all, it can be just a comment in addition to this, and thank you for that. No, totally, like, honestly, as I told you in the very beginning, I don't expect everyone to leave. We need more and more people within big tech is not one box, right? Like, we need to be on all fronts. The people inside, you know, middle management, you know, taking decision of procurement, raising the question, raising the topics, you know, and I tried this a little bit. I felt a little bit isolated, you know, I was trying to bring this, and eventually I was like, I'm gonna go out and build that coalition and come back. And I am engaging with big tech. In fact, a lot of people in my community work in big tech, but they're like, Asma, how can we support? We love this so much. and they find some sort of freedom, so they're volunteering, we're building tools, we're building stuff. So I'm right there with you, we should work together. Where it gets a little trickier is the funds, where are they directed, what is being funded, the political aspect of it, you know. Last month, Amnesty International made a report called Breaking Up with Big Tech, and I really encourage each one of you to take a look. It's the first time a human rights organization is tackling big tech, calling it a human rights crisis. I mean, this should tell us something. This is a shift in the whole. See, earlier when you said every time there's an industry, you know, this is the evolution of things. Sure, but in this case, we're actually raising the alarm, because the consequences are huge and they are impacting our most basic freedoms and rights. And you're not even feeling it, but you're giving away every day more of your rights and your freedom, until you realize they know everything about you. They know your opposite. They give you the predictive, you know, they predict your taste. They have positive reinforcements of your ideas, that you lost agency and you lost your critical thinking. And that's even like, some people are actually losing their lives due to AI. Again, AI warfare, AI, you know, and bias can also be disastrous if diagnosis is done wrong, you know, and if you rely on the diagnosis, and because you have a different skin color. So there needs to be a conscience that it's a life or death matter, but also not like reactive, that this is a long-term strategy and we need to build toward it. Not just like, oh my God, it's all. So, yes, basically it's a yes. You should keep your job, but change it from within.
One thing that, like maybe a nuance on that, is of course the fact, and so there were two parts of your remark. One is the kind of, the tech used to be progressive. I mean, that we also know that in the Silicon Valley people were supporting Democrats in the past, including Elon Musk was supporting Democrats. So it was, of course, a more progressive tech world, and now we have a authoritarian shift and a right-wing shift also in tech. So there's definitely that issue. What to do about that is, I don't know, it's a larger question. But then there's also the...
For the time to kind of change, I guess.
Hope.
Maybe just hope, like, I mean...
Hope, yeah, or advocate for it.
We do have many companies kind of adjusting to this atmosphere right now. In the end, people going on the street voting for what they see as true and what they see as correct might, you know what I mean? I mean, what can we do?
But
I
of course,
mean companies are revenue driven. Unfortunately, we live in a very capitalist world, right?
I mean, and then the question is, how does that then manifest in terms of the tech that actually is used by most people, right? I mean, we have seen these grok reproducing narratives, kind of white genocide kind of narratives around that were fake narratives, basically, and so on. And if that's implemented, there is this whole criticism that OpenAI's tools are supposed to be left biased, and if they give them a right bias, then there's an immense influence on more than just the tech people, right? And the second thing is, of course, the fact that you have ethical, and it's great that you have great work-life balance, but if OpenAI gives their people great work-life balance, it doesn't do anything for us. It's just the tech workers that have a better life, but it doesn't make their products more ethical. So I would really distinguish these two layers, and I think, yeah, it's important. But maybe we can give them...
about work-life balance generally for seeing progressive and inclusive work environment. Like, I mean,
I mean, that's also great, but that's kind of the privileged people who work in the tech industry. Again, it's not the end users. Yes.
Talk about this topic is kind of privileged, right?
Yes, but we're trying to go beyond the kind of, like, what's our comfort, because we are all comfortable. I mean, we are fairly comfortable, all of us, and we think about, okay, how can we make the tools, or whatever we want to call them, more ethical, and not just, but yeah. I just think it's an important distinction. Maybe, I don't know, there's now a few more questions. I'm always someone who likes to keep the debate until we have a feeling that we came to a conclusion, but then there's also the time, and some people are polite and stay until it's over, and I don't want to push too much, but I think let's take 2 more questions and then do a final round, if that's okay with you. And maybe we can have a drink and discuss a bit more than in the cafe.
Great, thank you. I'd like to pick up on the labor market situation, and I already thought about this earlier, and for example, we've discussed this also a lot. We have a lot of democracies kind of stumbling at the moment, right? And one of the reasons is that the middle class is eroding, inequality within societies, also in Western societies, is getting bigger and bigger. And one of the reasons is that manual labor, or like human labor, in relative terms to capital gains, and is shifting. So it becomes less and less, so to say, lucrative, or per hour of human work you get in relative terms less and less in relation to capital gains. And now, of course, there are those doomsday prognosis about AI and how it will make every second white-collar worker unemployed, and so on and so on. And that might be completely exaggerated, but what it will for sure do is create an even bigger shift from human work to capital gains. Like just if you think in terms of GDP, what percentage of GDP is created by tech, and so to say independently, and what percentage is created by human labor. So for sure the shift will increase, and in times when democracies are already fumbling and the inequality is already at a level that is very, very concerning, that I believe is a very big topic that makes me very worried. And yeah, I just wanted to add that, because of course that layer is also there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the next one will be on work. So please come on the 11th of December. Yeah. It's really diving deeper into this question. So how does it help work, but how does it also menace work? Of course.
That would have been the perfect question for Sabine Kösegi. So,
yeah. Exactly. So hopefully she'll be there, but we'll definitely have interesting experts as well on this topic. There was a second remark or question? No. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So I mean, one question that I kind of wanted to ask is what can an individual citizen do? I mean, if you're working in tech, of course you can try to be that voice, as long as you're able to. That voice that calls for more ethical product, that points out problems, that kind of insists. But when you're not in tech, I mean, what can we as citizens do? Should we deactivate the Google AI results? Can we even do that? The automatic AI results, should we as private citizens stop using AI because it's too resource consuming? Should we be more considerate about what would be your recommendations? What can we do? Should we advocate with politicians? What are the solutions that are for us as individual citizens?
Yeah. Yeah, pointing again that those AI solutions are products, and those companies, they have to fulfill certain criteria concerning gaining money. They want you to use this, and it's a product, so it's up to us to use their products, and we have the freedom to decide if we want to choose this product, which is based on cultural values from a certain continent, or if we use a product which originates from Europe. And those solutions now created in Europe are bound to European values. We have all these regulations now. In Europe, we follow the human-centered AI approach, and products coming from Europe are rising in quality, are gaining up. Also, we see a lot of demand in trustworthy products, so there are a lot of small contributors emerging. There's one company, one provider from Swiss, I forgot the name, but it's really focused on trustworthy and being inclusive. We have evaluated this in the AI task force and really considered if we can roll this out in our company, because it addresses certain values that we support. So yeah, and the other part is because all this AI solution, they are hungry for data, and we can decide which data we give them, which documents we upload, which conversation we lead on social media. You have to be aware when you're sharing something on X, all this information goes into Grok, the chatbot from X. All you're discussing on Facebook, and now even in WhatsApp. If you're including the AI agent in WhatsApp, the entire conversation is used to train the next Llama model. And the same goes for Gemini and for ChatGPT. You're feeding this with your data and you're contributing to the product. Actually, you're helping to build the next product for free. Or YouTube, anything, yeah. And this is something you have in your hands, you can decide.
So that's actually a very good point, like become conscious consumers of these technologies, make choices. I mean, you can choose whether you buy a fair trade chocolate and pay a bit more, or you buy, the Milka, sorry for the brand name, but yes, you buy the non-fair trade product, for instance. But in order to do that, we don't have the fair trade label yet, and we don't have so we need to work a bit to make these informed decisions. But I mean, coming here is one way to start working on it, but also keep looking at the things that come out of the watchdog organizations, of the critical organizations. Follow them. Again, I will put them in the resources, as many as I know. Feel free to send me things that you have in this direction. You have this AI harm map on your own website of the Ethical AI Alliance that's kind of tracking harm caused by AI. Try to kind of inform yourself. We are at a stage where we don't have the fair trade label yet, so we need to do more work, and also talk maybe to other people about your insights, so more people get aware of what it means that they now get an output that's AI generated. In Google, it's apparently 10 times more energy than a normal Google result.
Can I add something here?
Yes,
no, I just wanted to it might be a little disappointing because, quite frankly, I don't have a list and a prescription here of, it's almost like you asked me how to become a good human, and I'll just give you, do this, 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 that, and then, okay, then you go to paradise or whatever you believe in. Okay, but I don't want to dismiss what you said and what you said, because honestly, it's really important. But I don't want that, again, it falls only on the consumer, just like they made us believe that we are responsible for climate change. Recycling is what's going to save the planet, while fossil fuels are, while data centers are being done, they drive us, they make it almost impossible for us to avoid this technology if we want to be part of the society and work. So I can decide not to use Google and disengage with all these applications, but and I won't be able to talk about my advocacy work on LinkedIn. I won't be able to share this on that. It's really difficult. So while I acknowledge that we need both, we need the conscious citizen, and we really need to be conscious about, and please, I invite you to go and further research and read about this. It's also important that we put pressure as a collective on politicians. I know that there's some politicians in the EU. I mean, we're lucky to be in a region of the world that cares, that can put some pressure on, that we support the EU AI Act, like just you said in the beginning. But also, there's a lot of civil society working, on such as watchdogs, interdisciplinary communities, no matter what background you are or not, just tech. Please, we actually need people outside tech, because we left tech to tech people and look what happened. So we need health, humanitarians, lawyers, philosophers, we need everyone to build, because it impacts everyone We need everyone. And I want to finish on a really positive note. Let's learn to imagine. This is one of my favorite authors. Her name is Roha Benjamin, and she wrote a book called Imagination. Imagination is resistance. They want to erase our capability of also imagining the future where there's actually technology that could help us. Just starting by believing that it might be a possibility, and what is it, and how could it be, and even if it's, it's already an act of resistance. And it's important that we say it's resistance. It is, because it's political, it's driven by, some ideology that is not necessarily shared, good also for humanity, so yeah.
Okay, I think that's a positive statement to end it. Develop our own imaginations, our own narratives around the future. Don't believe that the AGI scaling law narrative is the only one, and that AI is here to stay, yes, but we can try to help to shape how it will stay and how it will look, and hopefully develop new narratives and new tools such as the ones you're both working on. Thank you all for coming here today and participating in this rich discussion. Maybe we can have a drink and talk a little more. I know there were some questions or comments unanswered, but I'd still like to wrap it up for the official part today.
I think it's unpolite to ask you again, sorry, because we are late.
Yeah.
Who you are, apologize.
Yeah.
Can you introduce yourself again? Quickly, sorry.
Do it like I lead a non-profit called Ethical AI Alliance. We are an interdisciplinary community advocating for ethics in AI and trying to provide tools to help bring accountability, such as this map he was talking about, like showcasing harms. It's a prototype, but we're developing and talking to pretty much all range of organization. And my background is in tech and strategy, basically.
My name is Alexander Schindler. I work at the Austrian Institute of Technology. I research a lot in the domain of artificial intelligence, and I also lead the AI task force.
My name is Klaus Speidel, and I'm a philosopher. I did a PhD in philosophy in Paris and have been based in Vienna since 2015 and founded the Wiener KI-Gespräche, Vienna Conversations on AI, where I try to bring together people from more technical backgrounds with people who have maybe more a theoretical or grassroots approach, sometimes art, and to have a conversation with society basically here in Vienna. Mostly it happens in German. Today we had an international guest.
Ich könnte auf Deutsch machen auch.
Which I learned very late, that you might have also spoken in German. But I think these topics you're more talking in English about them usually. But in any case, usually it's in German, and the next one will be in German at Dommuseum Wien, external partner on work, the future of work, Arbeit, and AI. So please sign up to the newsletter or look on the website, and I will, as I said, provide resources on Wiener KI-Gespräche.eu. Not com, not even AT, but EU. I think that's a unity we have to continue to carry and to push. So thank you again.
Thank you for this beautiful loop and your contributions. Have a nice evening. Thank you.
Danke.